See that right there? Textbook widowmaker. Maybe don't set your tent up under that.
Hello friends, Ben here from Moto Camp Nerd. I am obviously up at my favorite moto camping site, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about tent site selection. Where should you put your tent, what to consider when you're choosing a spot for your tent, and how to get the best spot at the campsite for your tent before your buddies grab it. So there are a few factors to consider when choosing a spot for your tent. The first and most obvious one, and the one most people think of immediately, is flatness. You need a relatively flat spot, but flat is not everything for a few different reasons. One, if the flattest spot is obstructed or needs to be cleared, say there's blackberry briars or there was a fire pit there and you're worried about nails and other garbage, it's just not a very clear spot. Maybe one time I set up and I was near a deer carcass. That was the flattest spot, so I didn't really want to be there in case something came to have a snack on the deer carcass, plus the smell. So while flatness is important, it is difficult sometimes to find a perfectly flat spot, and flat is relative to the other kinds of things you need to consider before you decide that that's the spot for you. Things to look out for before you set your tent up on that flat spot. Are there ants? Are there ant holes? Is there an ant hill? Is there a burrow of some kind? My kid one time set up her tent and didn't realize it over a ground squirrel burrow, and that was a shock at about 2 a.m. when the thing tried to come out and was running around underneath the surface of her tent. Definitely look around. Don't just pick a flat spot and jump on it. Think about other considerations in the area where your flat spot is. Also, remember you're going to be putting your knees on the ground underneath your tent, so softer is sometimes better than flatter. So for example, you can see right here where we are is kind of covered in this low green vegetation, and this is actually great for padding underneath your tent. So if you set up on top of this stuff, while the ground isn't perfectly clear, it'll give you some cushion, some padding. Also the loamy surface, so underneath this, it's all sort of mildly decayed fir needles and stuff. That's loamy. That's very soft and a very nice thing to have underneath your tent. Look out for sharp rocks under there. You don't want to be putting your knee directly on that, and it can rip holes in the bottom of your tent. So surface is another important thing to consider. Another consideration is rain runoff or drainage. Obviously, most of the time when you're camping, the weather's going to be nice. But if there's any chance of rain, or even if there isn't, depending on where you live, like here, I never roll the dice on that. If you find like a cozy little ditch-like gully that you just think, man, that'll be comfortable, I can sleep in there, I won't roll out of it, consider that water may run down into that in the night, and you'll be sleeping on a waterbed by morning. So that's another area where maybe having a little bit of a slope is not the end of the world, because if it's flat, water can pool there. If you're on a slope, it should just run past you and not pool up underneath your tent. Another thing to consider when choosing a spot for your tent is proximity to the fire. So too close to the fire and you can have things like embers popping out and landing in your tent and burning holes in it, so don't set up right next to it. That's always a bad idea. You also can deal with smoke getting into your tent and making everything inside smell like smoke forever. It's kind of unavoidable eventually on camping trips, but you don't really need to do it like right away. You don't want to be sleeping in there with smoke all night. Also, if you're in an area where you think there might be predators or scavengers, closer to the fire is more likely to discourage them from visiting. But if you've been cooking on the fire, then you definitely want to set up far away from that, because those scavengers and predators will come and investigate those smells. You never want to sleep where you cook in bear country or with cougars or whatever. If you're at all concerned, I would set up the tent not close to where you're cooking. Another consideration with tent site selection is the sun. Where is it? Where is it coming from? Where is it going to be in the morning? So when it's cooler, if you're camping in the fall or the spring, and you know it's going to be cold in the morning and you want that sun to hit your tent and warm it up before you get out, then you're going to want to set up where the shade in the morning, when the sun is in the east, is not going to be on your tent. So you want to set up on the east side of whatever's causing the shade as much as possible. The other advantage to doing that in the spring and the fall is that it gets light later, so you're not going to have a bunch of sunlight waking you up. In the summer, when it's warmer, you probably want to set up where the shade will fall on your tent in the morning so that you don't get bright sun directly into your tent, heating it up at 4:30 a.m. when the sun comes up super early. That is awful. Ask me how I know. Another big consideration is safety. So I pointed out a widowmaker at the beginning of the video. Widowmakers are a thing that you want to make sure that you're looking up and are aware of. It might be the best tent spot in the world, but if you look up and there are a bunch of dead branches precariously hanging there, if you look up and there's a dead tree leaning up against another one, only held up by branches that if it falls will land on you, that's bad. And even just broken off branches, I don't know how well you can see this, but here's a few broken off branches that are just hanging in other branches. This is a bad example because that couldn't kill you, although it would put a hole in your tent Anything like a dangling branch up above you that can fall down on you, that's your first consideration. Make sure there's no dangerous hazards that if the wind picks up, or even if it doesn't, your luck just runs out. Because if you're not looking out for widowmakers, then this camping trip could very well be your last. This tent site you select could very well be the last tent site you ever select. Not a great example because they're not very big, but this is the type of thing you're looking out for. You can see how the one is just held on by the crook in the branch, and the branch is on a downhill slant, so the one on the left could easily just slide off and fall on your tent and put a hole in it or whatever, and if it were a bigger branch, it could kill you. And these things are everywhere. These fir trees have a lot of dead branches below the canopy. They just stop sending nutrients to the ones that aren't getting any sunlight. They die, they can become brittle, and they can fall off. So you also want to be careful because all of these are attached, nothing's hanging, but they're all rotten and could fall off at any time. So with these big long ones, I would think twice before setting up directly underneath them. In this spot, a better spot would be under the tree right here, because if you look up, there are dead branches, but they're much smaller. There's nothing there that's gonna hurt you, although there is one widowmaker right there. I would grab that though. It's low enough that I could get it before I set my tent up. That's a much better spot. If you're ever not sure if a branch is broken off, if it's precarious, if it's potentially dangerous, don't set up under it. When in doubt, move your tent out. Maybe I'm being overly paranoid, but so many people forget to look up. They call them widowmakers for a reason. Just be careful where you set up when there's trees like this around that might have broken branches. Get to the campsite first. Why? Because if you're camping with friends, everybody's going to be looking for the best spot for their tent. Spots have varying degrees of usefulness. There's always a best spot. Try to get there first and set up first. Or if you're all arriving together and everyone's kind of putting around, taking their gear off, kind of looking around, grab your tent and start looking for a spot immediately. That's how you guarantee yourself that best spot. You'll be the most comfortable all night long. One more thing to consider is if and when you set up your tent on a hill. And that will happen because, like right here, there's no perfectly flat spots. The woods are not manicured. A campground, it's easy to find a flat spot most of the time because they're set up for that, but just out dispersed like this, you're gonna have to settle for a little bit of a slope. So this last tip is personal because the last time I camped up here, I did it wrong and I paid the price. So this whole campsite, I don't know if you can see it on camera, is at a slant like this. So uphill is over there. So if I was gonna set my tent up right here and there's a decent spot, I would orient it this way. So you want your tent to be parallel to the slope of the hill and perpendicular to the top of the hill. Does that make sense? So if the hill is here and here, you want to sleep like this with your head uphill, as straight up and down as possible, because if you set up on the side of a slope, you're going to be rolling out of your bag all night long, rolling off your sleeping pad, and every time you relax, you're going to move, you're going to slide, you're going to find yourself at the absolute lower end of your tent no matter what you do. And it is very hard to sleep when you have to maintain muscle control to stay on top of your pad. Versus if you set up with your head at the top of the hill and your legs downhill, you can sleep like that. You don't want to do it the other way because all the blood will rush to your head, it'll be uncomfortable. Head uphill, legs downhill is the most comfortable way to set up on a slope, and you're always going to have a slope, or 99% of the time there's going to be a slope. Find the top, try to find the straightest path from the top to the bottom of the hill. Set your tent up that way with your head at the top. You'll sleep better. Oh, another pro tip I forgot to mention. A footprint is an excellent tool, not just for protecting the bottom of your tent, but for figuring out where to put it, because it's the exact size of the bottom of your tent. So you can use it, like I can tell here that this needs to come up this way so my feet aren't in the firewood over there and in the bushes. Because I know exactly how big the tent is thanks to the footprint. I can position it where I want it before I start staking it down and building it. With freestanding tents, you can also just pick it up and move it, which is nice, but I usually like to stake the footprint down before I get started and start building it from there. So it's nice to kind of know exactly where I'm going to put it. One more consideration that I just remembered is that this is a game trail. You can see it. I don't know if it shows up on the camera, but right here, the deer come right down through here and around and out down the hill. Now, here it's kind of unavoidable because my whole campsite is on a game trail, but in general, if you're choosing a campsite, don't set up on a game trail, because not only are you likely to have deer and stuff like that running through your camp, just spooking you, but also the things that chase those smaller animals may also end up in your camp. It's a way that maybe animals use to get to the water source or whatever. So if you can avoid it, don't set up directly on a game trail, and try not to set up close to one if you can. not do that. We here at Moto Camp Nerd have set up tents in all kinds of different places, but we know that you all have too. So what are your best tips for setting up tents in the wilderness, finding a great spot for your tent? Let us know in the comments. And what other sort of intro to camping, moto camping topics would you like to see us cover here on the channel? Things like fire making, or how to go poop in the woods, or just how to pack your bike, stuff like that. What do you want to see? Let us know. We want to make content that makes the most sense for people that are wanting to get into moto camping, because we want to encourage people to get out and enjoy this thing that we love as much as we do. If you're looking for moto camping gear or motorcycle gear or motorcycle luggage, make sure you pop over to the site, motocampnerd.com, where you'll find the world's biggest and most carefully curated selection of motorcycle camping and motorcycle adventure specific gear. Everything is tested and vetted by our team, including me and the other Ben, so you can rest assured that whatever is there will work well for you as a motorcycle camper, because Moto Camp Nerd has all the gear you need so you can pack small and camp easy.